They refer to it as the talking season, although that's what we do every season around here. The talking season means conference media days. A lot of information came out. Blue White Pulse is next. And we welcome everyone to the Blue White Pulse. Steve Jones, Jay Paterno, Josh Sperber. Great to have you with us. Yes, it is the talking season. Last year, a lot of news was made out of Big Ten Media Day. This time, the only news that was really made, Jay, was Jim Harbaugh, who, for whatever reason, decided to go after somebody he doesn't have to coach against anymore.
And apparently Pat Fitzgerald has a take on phones and declining attendance. So again, really big stuff at the Big Ten Media Days. Yeah. And every coach hates them. Yeah. They can say what they want, they hate it.
Right, exactly. All right, but James Franklin, of course, met with the media and in his podium session discussed the state of his football team heading into camp.
We probably have more question marks this year than we've had over the last couple years. Obviously, when you lose a quarterback who's played as much football as Trace McSorley has played for us, that's going to lead you off with some question marks going into the season. But we are young, we are talented, and probably the fastest football team that I've been a part of in probably my 9 years as a head football coach. So we're excited about having that speed and athleticism on the field.
And yeah, every team is different. It takes on its own personality. And Josh, this will be a different challenge for this football team.
Yeah, there's a lot of question marks on this Penn State team, just a lot of inexperience on the offense. But the defense, a lot of familiar names, a lot of guys who have done really well in the offseason. And there's some talent there, but it's really hard to gauge how far along this Penn State team is.
In fact, let's look at the Cleveland Plain Dealer poll of Big Ten media as to how they voted out. See Nebraska leading in the West, and it's Michigan, Ohio State, Michigan State, Penn State in the East. A lot of this usually revolves around the returning quarterback.
No question.
And then, right, Jay, is that fair?
Hey, in 2008, I think we were picked 4th or 5th or 6th in that poll, and we won the dang thing. And because, again, we didn't have a returning quarterback, and Darryl Clark came out of nowhere, and Sean Clifford may be the same thing. We'll see.
What was interesting about that, though, is you knew what you had.
Oh, we knew what we had. We just, we just didn't want to tell anybody because talk only does so much for you.
Exactly right. But again, they're in that, quote, dark horse position. How can that be advantageous, Josh?
I think it can because, there's a lot of untested guys on this Penn State team, and there are some players that just play better with that chip on their shoulder. So with the youth on this team, they know how talented they are, and they've expressed a lot of confidence at, Live for Life, any events that we've talked to these players. And it could just be the spark that they need to advance in the Big Ten.
All right, so now let's get to camp. Camp has changed over the years, and these are all NCAA mandated rules. These are not Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan rules. Jay, no two-a-days any longer in the month of August.
Okay, you all remember the Muppet Show, Statler and Waldorf up in the balcony. That's going to be me. Look, camp, look. I understand the concussion issue. I understand the safety issue, but there also comes a time where you have to do some things in camp where you're fatigued and you got to focus and you got to be able to do certain things technique-wise, and you don't get to test those things if you don't really push them. And the NFL is no different. Everybody's, they just want to get the game.
The NFL's worse.
Right, and when you get to the game and say, why can't these guys tackle early in the season? Why can't these guys? Why are defenses not as good as they used to be? It's because you're not letting them do it in practice. And I think there's a happy medium we got to get to. The 2-1 schedule for a while I thought was really, really good, but we'll see.
In fact, I usually tell groups, they'll ask me about the tackling part. I said, look, it's everywhere. Don't just concentrate on your team. Right. And usually it's after 2 games, it's after by game 3 you start to see tackling that's realistic because that's where you're getting your tackling.
And week 3 is Pitt, so hopefully the tackling is
better be good.
We better win that one.
Better be good.
And I think in camp last year, I think every time I talked to one of the Penn State players, someone said something about, oh, we just want to hit not our guys. And that's really the theme of them coming off of camp. So it just kind of instills more of a fire in them to really get out there and get after other teams instead of just hitting guys in the blue and white jerseys.
Well, I can tell you, Sean Lee didn't care what uniform they were having. If there was somebody in offense, he hit them. I think he was ready to go after coaches every once in a while. No, you're exactly right. You get tired of it.
They had a blue line. Sean Lee would cross the blue line and he'd be like this, right? He'd go back over the blue line. He'd be Gandhi.
Mark of a
We'll talk
legend.
about the offense after this. All right, so let's get into the offense heading into camp, and this is where the lesser established players would be, the ones that don't have a lot of playing time are right now. So how do you look at the offense, Josh?
Again, it goes back to that they're just untested, but I think that they have a lot of talent. The running back committee is going to be everyone for themselves, really. You think that Ricky Slade and Journey Brown are really going to control it, but there's been a lot of good things said about Noah Kane and the other freshmen they have. So
Devin Ford, yeah.
That's what I was thinking of. But so there's a lot of talent in the wide receiver room. We've seen Shorter's going to be fully healthy, a full season of Jahan Dotson as well. I mean, it's hard to really gauge where they are because they don't have a lot of snaps with everyone, and they have a quarterback who's only thrown 7 passes. But I think there's a lot of talent there.
So let's get to that part, Jay. Let's discuss Sean Clifford. It's a limited sample size, but in that limited sample size, what have you seen? Is there an area where you look at and say, they can build upon this guy?
Well, he's shown pretty good accuracy in the limited sample size.
Yep.
Even the spring game, he made some nice passes that were dropped early on that spring game. So I mean, he knows where to put it. I think the biggest difference is going to be the mobility factor. When you look at last year, Trace McSorley got you out of a lot of jams and covered up a lot of sins on the offensive line and made some things happen. Sean does not quite have that ability, nor should anybody expect him to have it. Trace is a very, very unique guy. So the question is, can people be patient? Because there will be some learning curve. And again, puts a lot more pressure on the offensive line because defenses know where he's going to be. But I think he's got a lot of ability. But until that gun goes off in a big game and he's got to make the throw on a key 3rd down or 4th down, you won't know what you have.
I think people are going to be surprised by his mobility, though. I've heard that he actually tested better than Trace McSorley in some of the running things. He could be faster. Obviously, you're not going to know until the big game. But I think he can surprise people with his mobility, and he certainly has the arm.
Yeah, the straight line stuff, okay. It's that 3 to 4 foot circle in the pocket that's where your mobility, that'd be fair, right?
Yeah,
Jay?
plus I think the other thing is having the awareness. I mean, Trace had tremendous awareness as to where people were. And if without that mobility, you don't have to dedicate a guy to shadow or spy on your quarterback, and that frees more people up into coverage or to play the run game.
All right, let's bring it now. Let's talk about the running back room. Sean Clifford knows running backs can be part of his best friend group.
Our running back room is really strong, and we've had great running backs through here. I mean, obviously Saquon is one. Miles did tremendous things, and he's going to do great in the NFL. And then I think that the guys that we have in here right now are just a bunch of dogs. And I think that, it helps me personally because, when you have to worry about numerous people on the field, it opens up opportunities for yourself. So, I'm just excited about our offense.
And not a lot of experience with that running back group because when you look at them right away, if you look at quote what you'd say your top 4 is, well, 2 of them are true freshmen in your top 4. One is a true sophomore and one is a redshirt sophomore. That's Journey Brown, who was suspended for the summer. How do you look at the running backs?
Well, as you said, Steve, between the running backs, there are 53 carries in a game. So there's some inexperience. There's going to be a big learning curve. But I see a lot of versatility in these backs. You look at Noah Kane, really excelled in the spring game. Obviously not the best way to see because it's a spring game, but he had a rushing touchdown and a receiving touchdown. He showed ability to ground and pound, run between the tackles, and I think that you'll see a lot of that from the backs. Slade might be more of the just downhill running guy, but there's a lot of talent, and these backs can really do it all.
Our producer John Stroh and I had a good time with preseason watch list before we started the show. Here's the offensive preseason watch list, where at least they're getting some national recognition. A game breaker in there, and a guy that can be the quarterback's best friend in there too.
Yeah, I think one of the things I want to see out of Hamler, this year is how many ways can they get in the ball?
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things last year. You knew where he was going to line up, and you were able to account for him. But can they do some things with him? Move him around. And again, some of that comes down to the mental aspect is how much can he handle And you know, and that's every kid is different. So you know, you'd like to see him get the ball in the open field, a little bit like the kid at Purdue. I mean, that guy,
Rondale Moore.
He's a where's Waldo guy. You better know where he is every snap. But Hamler can be that kind of guy too, I think.
Then there's Freiermuth, Josh.
Yeah, I think Freiermuth's obviously coming off a huge year. I think he can be a huge force. Hamler led Penn State all receivers in every receiving category except touchdowns. Freiermuth had 8.
Nick Bowers obviously gives them a fifth-year guy. Kuntz gives them a different dimension maybe in the red zone.
When you have a guy who's 6'7", any jump ball, he's probably going to win. So I think you talked about Bowers built like an offensive lineman, and we've seen what Freiermuth can do. They have a really good combination of tight ends that can make that offense really difficult to defend.
And the third guy there was Michael Menet. And if you're going to pick out a guy you want to be the leader of your offensive line, a center is a good place to start with leadership. And Michael Menet has those leadership qualities. Well, it's a defense that can run. And we're going to see that on display all season long. We'll talk about that as we continue with Blue White Pulse. All right, welcome back. Let's talk about the defense. And Josh, it's a defense that a lot of people think can do a lot of positive things that can help the offense out this year.
Absolutely. I mean, defense wins championships, and if that was ever the case, I think Penn State is going to go as far as this defense takes them, because this is where you have the proven guys, and this is coming off a team where they were 4th in the nation in sacks, playing a game or two in the case of Clemson, less than any other team who was ahead of them. So get some more reps on this team. If that defense plays well, they might lead the nation in sacks and really carry this Penn State to surprise some people.
Every other day they release a watch list. This is not the complete one, but as we put this show together, this is the one we have, Jay. Yetur obviously was all Big Ten. He was one of the 5 guys recognized from the East. They recognized 10 altogether. Cam Brown, Micah Parsons on the Butkus Award. I mean, look, it makes sense. Going into the season, those are guys you would think that could establish themselves.
Yeah, and you know, in many, across all years of coaching, I've been in a lot of buildings. I've never seen photos of preseason all Big Ten winners.
No.
You see it in the postseason. So we'll see. I think obviously Yetur Gross-Mato is a guy that's probably going to be there at the end of the year. But I think the biggest thing for this defense is going to be, starts with the run game. You know, can they stop the run? I think it's going to be a challenge, because you look at last year, they gave up 170 yards a game rushing, which is the highest number at Penn State in about 17, 18 years. And that's going to be a challenge for them.
So let's go to Jan Johnson now, because Jan Johnson was asked specifically about that. He said, hey, look, he said, we've got to plug the hole.
I think that we have a bunch of guys that are pretty solid in the run game, and you know, Cam and Micah blitzing off the edge is going to be tough for anybody to stop. So I think that it's going to, you know, we're going to make a big impact, I think, on games this season, and I think it's going to show.
And a big part of that is going to be the ability of the front to set the linebackers up. They've got to set them up.
No question. I mean, look, if you're inside, I mean, you look at last year, some of the games they struggled defending the run. A lot of it was north-south. A lot of it was right up the middle. Illinois ran the ball effectively against them. Michigan ran the ball effectively against them. And I think when you look at who they've got to beat in their conference and in their division, Michigan State wants to run the ball.
Yes.
Ohio State wants to run the ball. Michigan wants to run the ball. Even the other teams. And you look at week 3, Pitt wants to run the football. Right. So that's going to be the biggest challenge. That's the thing they've got to really improve on.
Yeah, the one offensive play, because I do have a vote. So in full disclosure, I do have a vote on the 10 guys. Right. I don't vote on who finishes 1st through 7th. I could care less. So I vote in the 10 guys. The only offensive player I voted on in the East was Dobbins, the running back. He's the only one, Josh. Everybody else was a defensive player.
You know, Dobbins coming back with a lot of experience, and if we're talking about Penn State's line
and a
being able to
quarterback,
stop
by
him,
the way, that makes him more effective.
Yeah.
Right. Go ahead.
Well, I'm back to Penn State's line, I think, because that is really where I think the strength of the defense is. They're too deep at the end spot. They're too deep at the tackle spot. And when you have those amount of guys in rotations, it's dangerous, and you're able to stop a lot of things. We talked about their pass ability, but with the experience they have in that front 4 and the depth, they can really make some noise.
Linebacker, we know who the starters going into the season will be, but Jesse Luketa, Ellis Brooks are a couple of guys that have, especially Brooks, has some experience, makes you a better team in the 4th quarter because now your guys are fresher. The last pulse we did, we only touched and grazed on the secondary, so let's get into that for a moment. What can experienced corners mean in Tariq Castro-Fields, John Reed, to the other 9 guys?
Well, it frees up your safeties to be part of the run game, and I think that's going to be key for Penn State because again, you know, you want to be able to dictate. You know, the one thing this league has not had a lot of is the guy that can go out and throw the ball 40, 50 times a game and shred your defense.
Right.
Ohio State had it when they needed it against Penn State, and you know, Penn State played well against them for most of the game. Right. But you know, if you can take that thing away and your corners can free up go one-on-one outside and take guys out of the game, you know, that makes a big difference.
I'm really excited about John Reed being back for a full season. This is a guy who had a bad knee injury in 2017 and came back. He played better every single game of the season. His 2 interceptions were in conference play, both in the latter half of the season, and now he's fully healthy in his last year, and he's just been a great leader his entire tenure at Penn State. So a full season of him, I think, is going to be huge for that secondary.
There's another part too. Donovan Johnson's completely healed. I saw him at Live for Life. I mean, and you know, this guy banged out 20 reps at 225 pounds. I mean, which was impressive.
That's 19 more than I did.
Yeah, that's 20 more than I did.
Combined, we made 21.
Oh, and then there's Trent Gordon and Keaton Ellis. The area they've got, the safety part of it. This is where the JC player, Jaquan Brisker, I think is somebody that deserves a long look in helping them get the depth at safety that I think they need.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, the undervalued area in the secondary is getting the defense set. Because when you get into, one of the things about in practice, Penn State's a very static offense. Right. So when you're looking at them in terms of motions, formations, and all these personnel groups, they don't see a lot of that in practice. They're going to see it in week 3. They're going to see it with Michigan State. They're going to see it with Iowa and those people. So that's going to be important, how well they pick it up.
Well, part of the talking season happens to be a lot of issues in college football come up and are discussed by everybody. We'll get to some of those issues in a moment on Blue White Pulse. Next month we'll start previewing games, but in this particular episode we can talk about issues and get into more in depth on issues.
Oh, we've got issues on this panel, but I mean, you didn't mean those issues.
Exactly right.
That's a whole other show.
Now, despite the fact it was a 2-to-1 vote that they wanted me to transfer off the show, where did those 2 votes come from?
I have no idea.
Josh? Okay. The transfer portal obviously has been something that has been discussed a lot. Sandy Barber on how she views the transfer portal.
We, Penn State, or we other places I've been as a leader, have not denied students permission. Once they decide they want to leave, they ought to be able to leave. That's fine. What the portal has done, I don't think the portal itself is the problem, but the portal has exacerbated it by making it very public.
And no question it's more public, but I think there's 2 elements to this. There's the grad transfer part, and then there's the undergrad transfer part. So how do the 2 of you view each?
Well, the grad transfer thing has become free agency if you get your degree, and I get that, and I understand that, and guys get to, you know, I just wish that rule had been in place many, many years ago, because I know a lot of guys that would have benefited from it. But as far as the undergrad, I think the most important thing, everybody talks about recruiting rankings. I think you're going to start to look at how are people retaining people. Yeah. And I think, you know, people gripe about kids leaving, but I think it comes down to how you recruit kids. If you go out and you sell them on 3 and done, they expect to be a starter midway through their freshman year, or they think, I can't do that.
Or in camp.
Right, or in camp, and so they go, I'm out of here. And so I think there's an impatience that's bred from the way we recruit kids now, and I mean that nationally, not specifically in one school. So I think that's going to be the biggest thing, is the teams that are more upfront and honest with kids on the front end are going to reap the benefits on the back end.
Yeah, and Justin Fields fits into exactly what you're talking about. Yep. He transferred from Georgia to Ohio State because, look, he wasn't going to beat out Jake Fromm.
Nope.
Just wasn't. I mean, there are other issues, you know, but like there's also a bottom line to that. How do you view the 2?
Well, I mean, the thing I like about the transfer portal is the fact that you can kind of dip your toe in the pool and then maybe make a decision, change your mind, and decide to come back, kind of like Lamont and Wade did here at Penn State. So I like that aspect of it a lot.
Yeah. I think the one point Sandy makes is that it's more public now, which is, if you could back that up, it would let kids make those decisions in a vacuum without a lot of pressure.
See, now with the way it looks like a waiver wire. Yeah. Right now, that's what it looks like. All right, so now the next part. Strength of schedule, college football playoff. Sandy's view on that is?
I do not believe that the committee has been consistent, particularly as it relates to how they honor or incentivize or reward strength of schedule. And I think we've got to figure out a way, the committee has to figure out a way to send us a very strong, consistent signal.
You can't help what your conference schedule is.
Right.
It is what it is because that's who you play. You can help your non-conference schedule. So Jay, have the teams that have been able to get to the college football playoff, have they used the non-conference schedule to their advantage?
Well, I think some have, some haven't. You know, I think one of the things that we're going to have to see in the future, and Georgia, I think, will be a test case very soon.
Yes. Because
they're going out and they're grabbing some big marquee non-conference games. Yeah. Texas, you know, if Georgia goes 2 losses, wins the SEC, and has played Texas and Georgia Tech in their non-conference schedule and gets in over a 1-loss team, then I think we're going to have an argument with, yeah, it was the strength of schedule that really gave them that ability. But until that happens, I think they can talk all they want.
And something I like that Georgia did that some other teams in the SEC should follow through on is abandoning the Week 12 guarantee game. Because last year, I don't remember who it was they played, but they played someone that they should not be playing at that late point in the season. Alabama went from the Citadel to Western Carolina in that Week 12 game, which is ridiculous. And they're the biggest abuser of that. Look at 2017. Their last meaningful win before the college football playoff, them winning the national championship regardless, was Mercer.
Right.
That shouldn't happen.
I think they also need to establish with the conferences, and this has to come from the college football playoff. You need to play the same amount of conference games. Pick 8 or pick 9. Yeah. What do you think?
Well, I'd rather see the Big Ten. Let's go back to 8 conference games, and let's make a deal with the ACC or make a deal with another team, and that's your 9th conference game, whether it's the SEC or Pac-12. And I think there might be some value in that.
Actually, years ago they tried to do that with the Pac-12, and the Pac-12 backed out because USC and Stanford were both playing Notre Dame, and that was an issue. Hey, next up, Blue White Tailgate, just a month away.